Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Little Talks with Big Nikki. I am your host, Big Nikki. This episode we are talking about staying in your lane, not limiting your creativity, but also not feeling like you can't be yourself, like you can't be authentic because you're comparing yourself to others. We're going to get into that today on the podcast, so stay tuned. Roll intro.
Hey, this is Little Talk with Big Nikki.
What's up, everybody? How are we doing? I hope everybody is staying well, staying healthy, with everything kind of reopening. I know things are crazy for a lot of people right now. But yeah, hope you're well. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. I appreciate you guys listening. This week, we are talking about staying in your lane. Stay in your lane. It's one of my favorite phrases to say, and about a month ago, I kind of got this idea to do a podcast topic on it. So I was like, what better time than now? Let's just do it. So I want to start this conversation by saying you don't want to limit your creativity. When you're talking about staying in your lane, I'm talking about one of two things. Either you're demeaning yourself by comparisons, or you're pulling someone else down in order to elevate yourself. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about might come from a creative standpoint, because I am a freelancer, I am a photographer, but this can also easily be applied to pretty much anything you're doing in your life, even if it's not creative based. So what do I mean by this? Let's break it down. So all of us know how the gram works. All of us know how social media is, where we're so easily pulled into other people's so-called perfection that they post. And it's very tempting to look at other people's work, see what people are doing. I look at other photographers, work or their projects, and I'm like, man, like I'm not doing that, or I don't know how to do that, or I'm demeaning myself because I'm comparing myself to them, saying like I'm not to that level, I'm not that good, and then you kind of start getting into the spiral of you're not good enough, and you're not them, and your talent's not there, your skill's not there, whatever it might be that you tell yourself when you see these posts that you fall into the comparison trap with. So you could also then be on the other spectrum, on the other side of the table, where you see people's posts or what they're doing, and you're like, oh man, like, well, I'm way above them. Oh, I'm better than that. Oh, that picture they posted, that was like, yikes, did you see that? All these things to build yourself up. And this is something we all do as humans. I feel like it's a constant, even before social media. Like, I know people love to hate on social media. And, especially people of older generations are like, this is why the world's messed up, and this is why people aren't happy, and people are anxious, and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, okay, there's some truth to that. Social media is not perfect. It was never meant to be perfect, even though which is funny because we all try to, like, make ourselves look perfect on there, but it's not the case. However, the problem I'm talking about needing to stay in your lane is not new to the internet or to social media. This was a problem long before. You would be out somewhere, which is a funny concept because of the virus now. We're also used to like not seeing other people. So maybe this has died down a little, but pre-Rona, it was always, you'd see somebody and you're like, oh, like, and maybe this is a female thing, but I know we do this. I know I do this sometimes. I'm not perfect, so I'm calling myself out. Here I go. You see someone and you're like, oh, like, well, I'm prettier than her. Oh, I look better than her. whatever the case is. And that sounds so bad saying it out loud. And you're like, man, I'm really not that mean of a person. And you would never say that out loud to somebody. But we've all thought it. Don't even lie. Don't even lie. Little Talks with Big Nikki, we keep it 100. We keep it real. Don't even lie that you have not said that, because you have. There again, maybe men, it's different, but for some reason, females, we like to do that to each other, and it's unhealthy, but this is what we do, which is a whole nother topic of conversation. But my point is you're always evaluating other people. Maybe it is just strictly in a professional sense, has nothing to do with appearances, but you're like, oh, like I do my job better than her or better than him. Like I do my job better. And so you're pulling someone else down to make yourself feel elevated. This is a normal human experience. Or you end up demeaning yourself because you feel like someone else is better than you. So it's like, where is the happy medium? And to be honest, sadly, with basic human nature and our thought patterns, I don't know if there is a happy medium, because I feel like we're really usually on either side of the coin, where we end up demeaning ourselves or demeaning somebody else. And it's so unhealthy when you stop and look at it like that. But this is what I want to talk about. Like I said, this is going to come off mainly from a creative standpoint, but this can be applied to anything, is staying in your lane. The key word there is your. So you need to stick to being you, to being yourself. That doesn't mean that you can't grow, change, improve, better yourself. That is not what that's saying. And that's also not saying to limit your creativity. That is not saying like, oh, if you are a photographer right now, you always have to be a photographer. More specifically, if you're a photographer right now and all you do is headshots, that's all you can do is headshots. That is not at all what I am saying. I am saying if you're a photographer and you are particularly good, that's a hard word to say, at headshots, then keep doing headshots, as long as you enjoy it. Like I'm a big proponent of like, don't do things repeatedly that you don't enjoy or you don't like to do. But if you enjoy it, you're fine doing it, do it. However, you have to realize this is the accepting portion, that you, and I'm preaching to myself, so don't just feel like I'm preaching to y'all, that you are never going to be perfect. There is always going to be, especially if you're like me and you're a type 1 on the Enneagram and you're a perfectionist, it will never be enough. You will look at every single photo you've ever taken and been like, that's not quite where I want it. That could have been better. What was I thinking? Why do they look like this? Why did I not correct it? Fix it in the moment, whatever. There will never be good enough, but you have to accept that it will never be perfect to you. I'm saying this especially if you're a perfectionist. The second thing is you will always think that someone is more qualified, more skilled, more equipped. You will always think that, especially in a creative realm. You will always look at somebody else and be like, they are better than me, they are more knowledgeable and more experienced. And you know why? That's because somebody is. You think that because it's true. And I'm not saying this to be harsh. I'm not saying this to be mean. This is with anything in life. Sports, creatively, in school, in work, being a parent. There probably is somebody better than you. You have to keep that in mind. There is always going to be somebody better than you. Even with me applying for jobs right now, I'm sure I can put money on it if I had any. Jokes. Okay, that wasn't funny. It's fine. I would put money on it that, if I apply for a communications position, whatever that position requires, there is somebody better qualified for that job than me. There is. Guaranteed, there's how many billion people in this world, there's somebody better qualified for that job than me. That doesn't mean I'm not going to get the job, but if I'm going to sit here and be honest, there's somebody better than me. And you have to accept that, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're bad at what you do. Just because there's somebody better doesn't mean that you're bad. I think this is a concept we all need to come to terms with, especially in 2020. Everybody's like, no, you're great at you're great at everything. Like all these kids, like I know this is a reoccurring joke for comedians about, the participation awards or trophies, or like in kids like soccer games or baseball games or whatever, they don't like keep score because it's like everyone's a winner. Well, no, I'm still like old school in that thought process of like, we should not be rewarding everybody because that doesn't mean you're good. Like, it doesn't mean just because you're rewarded for something doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best at it. And just because you're good at something doesn't mean that there's nobody better than you. There's always somebody better than you. That's like these kids who are like high school rock star athletes. Yeah, they're like really good at the sport they play at their high school. They go to college, the competition gets even better. And maybe they're not the top seeded person anymore. And then you take that to like pre-pro and then professional, and the number just dwindles. So like you might have been number 1, but now you're number 10. Now you're number 25, and now you're number 50. Like there's always somebody better than you. That doesn't mean that someone who's a rock star high school athlete will never be a professional athlete. It's very possible and has happened before. But that doesn't mean that outside of the realm of your high school that there's nobody better than you, because there is. And this is just the fact of life. Again, not that you're bad at the sport you play, that you're really good, especially if you make it professionally. You're really good, but that doesn't mean you're the best. You're always going to think someone's better than you because there is someone better than you. And if you don't like that, then I don't know what to tell you, but that's the hard facts and truths of life. So do with that what you may. But you need to stick to being you. You can aspire to achieve what, someone you think is better than you is doing. It's always good to have role models, to have inspirations, someone to aspire to be like or to look up towards. Like that's a good thing, as long as you don't idolize them to an unhealthy point. That's not good. But it's not bad to, want to better yourself because you want to be like somebody else in, an aspect like a sport or a skill or something. But you need to stick to being authentic and to being you. And that comes with staying in your own lane. Because the problem is like, once you're swayed to kind of change your lane because you're either, there again, like demeaning yourself or you're demeaning somebody else, so you're like elevating, that's not staying in your lane. That's wanting to change lanes because you're not getting where you want to go fast enough. I said it. I'm dropping some knowledge. Gosh darn it. I am dropping it. You are swayed to change lanes because you're not getting where you want to go fast enough. It is so easy. And I've talked about this before, and I'll talk about it again. It is so easy when you are in a stage of life where you are struggling, you are not where you want to be, you maybe aren't quote unquote as successful as you want to be. It is so easy to look over here and look over here and be like, man, maybe if I just change up, maybe if I just switch my lane, maybe if I just change up how I do things or what I do, I can be like them. And now you're moving out of your lane into somebody else's lane that was never intended for you to be in. You better be writing this down. This is good stuff. You need to stick to being authentic even though it's difficult. So going back to talking about photography, not saying to limit your creativity, but if you see a photographer do something and you're like, man, that's really good. I don't really know how to do that, But let's just say also that that's not really your MO. Like, let's say that they did something with like a model shoot. I've struggled with this all the time. I've told several people this. I do not really shoot models. I have not gotten into that. It's not where my passion really lies. For me to do a model shoot, outside of the few that I've done just to get practice, I really would need it to mean something. I would really need it to be something like deep and metaphoric and significant. I would really need it to be that for me to do it. The thought of me to just ask somebody I know to get dressed up in a certain way and we're just gonna go around and take some pictures and do some poses, that doesn't appeal to me at all, to be honest with you. Never has, and I don't know if it ever will. Maybe it could change easily, but I see a lot of people doing that. Before the virus and now I see people doing that. And it's like, oh, well, that's great for them. They have content to post because, you know, they do these shoots with these models. I'm over here as an event photographer. That is where my passion lies. I love getting candids. I love shooting events because of the people I get to meet and the photos I get to take. I love it. Well, obviously I'm not doing that right now. So it's like, I don't have photography content to post. Now, do I? No. So it's very easy for me to look at them and be like, oh, well, like they have content to post, or like this turned out good for them. But then if I were to do that, I feel like I would be doing it out of a place of unauthenticity. That's not the right word. I can't think of the word right now, guys. My brain's not working. But the point is, I would be doing it out of a place that's not right. I would be doing it because I want to be like them and have what they have, in this case content or photos, and not because I truly enjoy shooting models or because I'm passionate about what I'm shooting. And guess what? That's going to show through every single time. Every single time that's going to show through, maybe not even immediately, but at some point it's going to show. Now listen, that doesn't mean you're always going to love what you do, or you're going to, in a photography sense, love what you shoot, but that there has to be at least a certain point of authenticity and of you in it, especially creatively. If a piece of you is not in it, it's not going to be that great. And I've learned that, and I've realized that. So it's so easy when things are not what you want them to be or going the way you want them to be to, like I said, swerve and go out of your lane instead of staying in it and be like somebody else or emulate somebody else. I've had this discussion about the podcast like a lot of times. People have told me my conversations are too serious, my topics are too it's not necessarily like comedy. It's not like funny to listen to. It's not like super lighthearted. It's, I'm talking about serious stuff. And I could easily say, you know what? I love Trey Kennedy's Correct Opinion podcast because he talks about like all this, funny stuff and, funny news and kind of roast things and talks about what makes him triggered. And I love it. I love listening to that podcast so much. And I could easily say, I'm going to do what he's doing. But I would be moving out of my lane and doing something that was not meant for me, even though it looks appealing. And I would be losing myself in the process because that's not really what I want my podcast to be about. That's not really what I want to talk about week to week. So it's very easy to want to change your lane because you see something working for somebody else or you see something going well for somebody else. That doesn't mean that it's going to be good for you or go well for you, because that might not be your purpose. That might not be intended for you. Everybody has their lane, and That's why it's like it's a nice catchy phrase, like stay in your lane. But it really, when you break it down, it means like so much more. Like you really do need to stay in your lane, because as soon as you go outside of it, you're losing not only kind of what was meant for you, but also, like I said, your authenticity. You're losing a part of yourself when you're trying to go over here, go over there, and be something you're not, or try to do something that's not meant for you to do. And getting a little bit like deeper into this metaphorically, don't you think that if you have a lane, that lane is the path for you, is the direction for you? Don't you think that lane is ordered or created to go where you're meant to go? So, if you step outside of that, if you change into somebody else's lane, now you're going where they were supposed to go, where they're meant to go. And that wasn't for you. That was never a place that you were supposed to be in. And I bet if we all kind of look back at times in our lives when we tried to do something based upon like what somebody else was doing, that we found ourselves either not being fully satisfied, not being fully happy, or, left like disappointed because we're like, oh, like, well, that didn't work out for me either. So what am I supposed to do? And then it's like, yeah, things might be like hard or, like I said, discouraging or disappointing right now, but that doesn't mean that you're not supposed to stay in your lane and stay doing what you're doing. Granted, there's always situations and times in your life that you need to change, or you need to adjust accordingly. But I'm talking about these passions and the dreams we have and the things we want and what goes along with those, that we can't, when it's not blowing up or it's not, going the way we thought it was going to go, that we just are like, oh, okay, well, like, I'm just going to go over here in this person's lane and do what they're doing because that's working for them. Doesn't mean it's going to work for you, and then you're going to lend yourself and end up in even more of a place of discouragement, because now that's not working either. And now you're like, well, that's not working and this wasn't working. But your definition of not working and God's definition of not working, in my opinion, are probably a little bit different. If I've learned anything, that's you saying it's not working and him saying it's not working. He says, I'm still working. Like, this is not the end. Don't put a period where God put a comma. I know y'all know that one. But it's like, you can't leave your lane because it looks better. The grass is not always greener on the other side. It's not always worth it for you to change your lane. And like I just said, many of us probably have, and we have come right back into our own because things didn't work out in that lane either. So the whole basis of this is you need to keep your authenticity for yourself and for the purpose of your life. You are not that other person. They are not you. You were not made to do the same things. You were not made to enjoy the same things. It was that's the beauty of being so different. And even, just going back to photography, even though you're both photographers, you both enjoy photography, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're supposed to be photographing the same thing or photographing in the same way, because that's the beauty of having an art form like photos or illustration or music, anything in the creative realm. It's subjective, it's interpretation, it's how you see the world and how you want to interpret it, and that's supposed to be different for everybody. So if you're trying to steer somewhere else and have an interpretation that is not your own, it's fake. and now you're fake. When you leave your lane, you can easily become fake. In this world, sometimes, I know it seems, I know I've thought about this, it very much seems like what's fake gets the reaction, it gets the views, it gets the followers, it gets the fame, but in the long run, is that gonna hold up? Because if I've seen anything, whether it's been, a brand like a company, or whether it's been an individual, if somebody's fake, sooner or later they end up getting called out. So if you don't stay in your lane, it's just a whole cycle. If you don't stay in your lane, you're gonna lose authenticity. If you lose authenticity, now you're fake. And once you're fake, you're pretty much inevitably gonna be called out. And you don't want to be called out for being fake when you were trying to keep your authenticity in the beginning. Because now, what are you left with? In last week's podcast, I talked about kind of losing credibility. Well, don't you think that loses you credibility when you were trying to be something you're not and you got called for it? You can't be mad about that. So you need to stay in your lane, like I said, whether this is creatively or career-wise. I'm feeling this career-wise right now, even just looking for a job, because it's man, I came in to Cleveland State with a major, I was going to major in finance. I did not major in finance, y'all. I changed that real quick. I think I changed that before I even started my first semester here. I changed it to marketing because I, did some shadow days, whatever. And I realized that's not what I wanted to do. But it's easy even now that I finished my degree in marketing. I have a bachelor's of business administration. It's easy now for me sitting here trying to find work and to find a job that pays me decent, to be man, should have just stuck with finance. I would pretty much have a guaranteed job at way higher of a salary than what I'm probably going to get doing what I want to do. But that's not who I am. That's not what I enjoy. That's not what I was made to do. That works for a lot of people. I know a lot of people in that major, and that works for them, but it was not for me. So it's, even now, even after, you're on the other side of I got my education, but now you're trying to find a job, and you're still sitting here thinking should have just been a finance major. What if I was a finance major right now? And you're playing these what ifs. What if I didn't stay in my lane? What would my life be like? Well, yeah, you might have been able to find a job and you probably would have hated it. And then you're working a 40-hour-a-week job that you despise. Then where does that leave you? It's never as great as it seems, even though we play that in our head and we play this stuff up. It's usually not ever what we actually think it's going to be like. So you need to stay in your lane, stay grounded, stay humble, but, hold true to what you do. Hold true to what you're good at, where your, skills are, and what you do well. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, when you're staying in your lane, there's nothing wrong with elevating yourself. So instead of demeaning yourself by comparisons or demeaning somebody else, elevate yourself. I've said this before. No, who's gonna invest in you if you don't invest in yourself? Nobody. If you don't invest in yourself, nobody else is gonna invest in yourself. If you don't take yourself seriously, who else is gonna take you seriously? Probably nobody. So instead of demeaning yourself because you're too busy comparing yourself to what, so-and-so over here is doing, or what they can do compared to what you can't do, or before you're oh, I'm so much better than them, that you're elevating yourself in comparison to somebody else. Just elevate yourself. And while you're elevating yourself, while you're staying in your lane, you know what else you can do? Elevate others. The most beautiful thing that I've seen is the people in my circle. We got a creative circle, got a creative community, and we're doing podcasts, we're doing vlogs, we're doing photography, video, like all these creative things, graphic design. Like the people that I have in my life, I am, as much as I can, and I try to make a conscious effort to do it because I believe in them, and I do love the content that they put out, and I love what they do, and they are so talented. These are talented people. I try to elevate them as much as I possibly can, and they try to elevate me. And it's not even so much of a reciprocal thing. It's not like, oh, they did it, so now I have to do it. No, it's just as things happen, I'll see this video and I'll be like, man, you guys should watch this video. This is really good. And then they'll listen to my podcast and be like, yeah, this is a really good podcast. Y'all should listen to it. So while you're staying in your lane, you should elevate yourself, not by comparison, and you should elevate others. See, because the other thing to do is when you move to somebody else's lane, or the other thing that happens, I should say, is when you move to somebody else's lane and you're trying to pretty much do what they do. I'm not saying you're trying to exactly copy them, but you're just trying to do what they do to, in your mind, in that point, you're trying to better yourself. How are you supposed to elevate them when you're kind of trying to copy them or to take aspects of what they do and make it your own? Now you're kind of in competition. Do you see what I'm saying? Because I think of this all the time, with photography. I know I talked about this before. Is it a competition between me and another photographer of who's going to get hired? And the realization that I've had recently is the answer is no, because that person has their own personality and character, and that person has their own special skill set. They might be phenomenal at shooting weddings. Even if I did shoot weddings, let's say, I don't, but even if I did, they might vibe the way that they shoot and the way that, their character and personality is. They're gonna vibe with certain couples, and I'm gonna vibe with certain couples, because everybody has their own preferences, and everybody has there again, it's even in how they edit it. What kind of colors, do they use, and or some sort of presets. Do they use some sort of, not a filter, but everyone's wedding photos kind of look different, because every photographer is different. So there again, it's we're not competing. If you stay in your lane and do what you do, how you do it, and I stay in my lane and do what I do, how I do it, you're not competing. But if I move over in your lane and I'm trying to do what you do, well, now how are we supposed to elevate each other when we're literally in competition with one another? Because we're trying to do the exact same thing. You cannot elevate yourself, because deep down you're not being authentic. You cannot elevate yourself, and you cannot elevate others if you're not staying in your lane. You can't. It does not work. So if you don't stay in your lane, I think that's when you so easily, there again, can demean yourself by comparison, or you can demean somebody else by comparison to make you feel better because you're insecure about being in your lane. And you know what? It is tough, and it is scary, and you can be uncomfortable, and you can be insecure, because being in your lane does not mean that it's always going the greatest. That's why it's so tempting to change your lane. That's why comparisons are so easy to make. It's not simple, but if you want to stay true to yourself and and keep your authenticity and keep your credibility, you need to stay in your lane. You can't be swerving over into others. Don't swerve. No swerving allowed. Don't do it. Because then when you're swerving, you're making it, dangerous for other people as well. There we go. Another metaphor, getting even deeper. You can't, when you're swerving lanes, now you're endangering people in the lane that you're trying to swerve into. You can't elevate them if you're almost hitting them, can you? Nope. No, you cannot. So keep yourself elevated, keep yourself safe, keep other people elevated, keep them safe by staying in your lane. I feel like kind of in High School Musical when they're like singing stick to the status quo or whatever. That is not what I'm saying. There are always times to challenge things, to do things that haven't been done before, to kind of push the boundaries, push the limits. I am all about that. Like, just because something has been the same for years doesn't mean that it should still be the same. Definitely not. That's what I'm saying. Like, don't limit your creativity. Don't feel like you can't progress and better yourself. There's a difference between, like I said, aspiring to and bettering yourself because of an aspiration. There's a difference between that and then literally just being like, you know what, I'm just going to pretty much do what they're doing because that's working for them. Doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Stay in your lane and accept that you're never going to be perfect, and there's always going to be someone better than you. And in this like thing of life, you're always going to feel like somebody's ahead of you. I feel like we all have like that one friend where you're like, oh my gosh, like they graduated college a year early and they got married like as soon as or they were engaged as soon as they graduated, and now they're married and they already bought their first house, and you're like, I'm still just trying to get a job. Like, you know, we all always think that there's somebody ahead of us. I said this recently in a podcast, but I'll say it again. It's like that generic saying that's kind of cheesy, but it's really true. Like, you can't compare your like page 2 to somebody's chapter 1. Like or chapter 2, maybe is the better way to say it. Something like that. You guys know what I'm talking about. You can't compare. Just because someone else's life is going like this, that doesn't mean that you are. But that's what I'm saying. You can't be swayed to change lanes because you're not getting where you want to go fast enough. Because you're not going to get there any faster following somebody else. Are you? No. You can't. If you change lanes and you're trying to follow behind somebody else, you're not going to get there any faster. You might think you are, you might think you will, but you're really not going to. So just stay in your lane, stay authentic, stay doing what you're doing. I'm here to encourage myself for one, but also encourage you if you're listening to this and you've been tempted to, be like, screw it, I'm going to just do this because that's what they're doing and it's working for them. Don't do it. You know what I mean? Like, just stay in your lane. Stay doing what you want to do. And I am a believer that if that is really like your purpose and you're staying true to yourself and you're staying authentic, that it's going to get you where you want to go. Maybe not in the time you want to get there, maybe not fast enough in your opinion, but it will get you there. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much for listening. If you're new, thank you for hopping on the Little Talks with Big Nikki bandwagon. I hope you stick around. Hope you listen to the other episodes that I've put out of this podcast. If you listen every week, I very much appreciate you and your loyalty to the podcast. Greatly appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe if you don't already. If you have a comment, I want to know about it. Tell me what you thought about this. Say whatever you want. Recommendation for another podcast. I'm always open to suggestions. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Would love to just get that feedback from you guys. If you like what I'm talking about, if you're listening on any other platform, thank you so much for listening. And make sure you follow me. And you follow me on social media, Instagram and Twitter mainly. Facebook, I guess, if you want, should be linked below and or popping up on my screen. So make sure you follow me on those platforms. And yeah, I think that's all we have for this week. So again, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you stay healthy. Hope you stay safe. Hope you stay sane. And we will be back with another episode of Little Talks with Big Nikki in a week. And I will see y'all then. Bye, guys.